of torture against Palestinian unlawfully detained. I would move the attention to something else, which is not merely circumstantial and that has happened over the past months. The ICC has been under unprecedented pressure. The other by the United States. I remind you, entirety, states have violated their obligation to cooperate with the court and to arrest the persons under arrest warrant by allowing, for example, ICC wanted Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, to use their airspace. Again, Hungary has stepped out of the Rome Statute and has said that they will not arrest and so has Poland. So the and it took National Criminal Court that it's being dismantled brick by of a combination of reasons that I believe bring reality that allows a certain legitimate criticism against the ICC. But international law, including international criminal law, is enforceable only and is enforced only through member states. It's not that the ICC has its own police. So the ICC is frankly strangled. I would like to know if in 5 years' time or 10 years' time things progress this way, the ICC will still be there. This is, I mean, we are not talking of a dystopic future. We are in a dystopic moment where member states, influential member states, clearly do not play by the rules and say openly that they don't need the international system anymore. They can conduct themselves according to the principle might make right. And there is only one force that can stop this abhorrent dystopic presence, and it's us, as ordinary citizens in the United States, in Europe, in this continent, which has become more and more silent vis-a-vis the crimes committed against the Palestinians. And for me, Palestine is a test. So again, I think that the problem is not with the individuals or in the ICC or the institution per se. It's systematic and widespread. On the second question, I agree with you that history didn't start, violence in Palestine or Israel-Palestine didn't start on October 7, of course not. I mean, I've written 7 reports on that, so I don't need to be convinced. You ask me why UN officials do not take a stronger position. Well, you are in New York, why don't you ask them? I cannot reply on their behalf.
Honestly, I did ask them many times, including the Secretary General, who mentioned it once and never repeated it again because they asked him to resign and they attacked him severely, the way they attack you now. And since then, he never repeated that October 7 did not come from a vacuum.
We've got about 15 minutes left of the Special Rapporteur's time, so if we can keep it to one question and then we've got to go online. Go ahead, thank you.
Thank you so much. Good to see you, Ms. Albanese. Thank you so much for this briefing. Afram Kusaifi from Arab News Daily. You mentioned that this is all about the survival also of the UN according to its norms and values. Can you elaborate, please, on that? What are your concerns regarding the future of this organization? And given the fact that most countries you mention in your report, especially Western countries, are actually countries that pride themselves on upholding international law and human rights law and all the conventions, where does that leave international law these days from a lawyer's perspective as well? Thank you.
No, I think that the member, I mean, what you say, and what you say that member states take pride in championing international law. No, they don't do that anymore. They don't need. And the hypocrisy of many is so exposed that I understand why they don't pretend to champion international law anymore. In certain contexts, they do. They do invoke international law against Russia to end the war in Ukraine, and I think this is right. But it's the double standards are so stark that are pathetic. But also, I think of the other people who are dying while most of the international community looks away. Think of Sudan. Think of Congo. There are 50 wars ongoing, and there is no attention to this. Really, no attention and no care. Just sporadic, superficial, and inconsequential words of condemnation. So I think that this moment is, as I've often said, apocalyptic in the sense that it's showing the apocalyptic destruction in Gaza, but also it's revealing who we are as individuals, as communities, as states, as organizations. The United Nations was set up to protect peace and stability, to prevent conflicts. And for a long time, it has managed to avoid at least a nuclear war. But in Gaza, it has failed miserably. It has failed to enforce international law, which for me as a lawyer is the most serious responsibility. I've said it since October 10, 2023, Israel cannot claim self-defense. Israel cannot invoke self-defense. Article 51 of the UN Charter does not apply in a context of permanent occupation. It applies only in situation of conflicts among states. If Israel or its acolytes are convinced that Hamas, without an army, or a Palestinian armed group, without an army, without tanks, without F-35 or whatever, constitutes a threat to Israel's security to justify the use of force, well, they have to go to the International Court of Justice and seek for another advisory opinion, because so far the law prevents Israel from invoking the law of self-defense while, as the ICJ says, illegally occupying a territory that is not his own. So Israel needs to withdraw the troops, dismantle the colonies, and stop exploiting Palestinian resources and practicing apartheid against and racial segregation against the Palestinians. So this function has failed. The function of channeling and hosting advancing discussion to stop the brutality, to stop the violation of international humanitarian law has failed. As I said before in my opening remarks, what I find most depressing is what has happened to the humanitarian function of the United Nations. It has failed. And the United Nations as a whole, despite words here and there, the United Nations have allowed the dismantlement, the almost nearly complete dismantlement of the humanitarian function of the United Nations in Gaza through the huge blow that has been suffered by UNRWA. The fact the member states, because eventually the United Nations is an organization it's an intergovernmental organization. It exists as a coalition, as a family of all states. And these all states have not been altogether being able to contain and isolate the two states that are creating a threat to peace and security in the Arab region and beyond, which are Israel and the United States. And again, this continues. I mean, it's since October 11, member states keep on celebrating peace, the end of hostilities, but the mediocrity and the hypocrisy of this debate leaves me speechless. I don't know what to say. Nearly 100 Palestinians have been killed. Nearly 350 of them have been injured. They continue to be starved. Aid doesn't enter. The hostages, thankfully, have been released and have been allowed to return to the safety of their homes, while the Palestinians have not. the bodies of the withheld Palestinians have returned desecrated and with the signs of torture, which speaks to the hubris of Israel, that it really has no shame. The Palestinian prisoners or the Palestinian hostages who have been released recount of the torture they have suffered. There are tens of thousands of, there are 10,000 Palestinians still held in jail, and nothing changes. So I think this is, I mean, what does it say to the young generation? Because my generation grew with this ideal or this idealism toward the United Nations, which so miserably fail to uphold the UN Charter. And what does it tell about international law? No, I think that international law has a different story, because international law is a system of norms that are there to allow me to distinguish between the wrong and the right. And today, the international law is spoken by the masses against genocide, against apartheid, against Israel's crimes. Probably member states and diplomats and civil servants have not realized yet, but we are living a phase of acceleration, and we are already into the future where the United Nations is becoming, and I'm sorry to say that, because of course I would like to see the United Nations rise and straighten its back and its head and stand solid and principled into the future. But the United Nations is becoming more and more irrelevant, I'm afraid.
One question from the back.
Thank you very much. Paolo Mastrolilli with the Italian daily La Repubblica. I would like to go back to what you said about Italy in the report. What should Italy do in order to comply with your report? Stop selling weapons, stop trading with Israel. What are the concrete steps that you would expect from Italy?
One positive thing would be for the Italian government to read my reports and to engage with the content of my reports and the findings, instead of spreading spurious allegations that only distract from the core of the matter. Italy is showing a level of political immaturity that are not registered in any other country I have had the privilege or the chance to engage with. And the appearance of the Italian ambassador, for once he's taking the floor, will go down in history as ludicrous, because again, it didn't touch on any of the findings they had brought to the fore. He could have come and say, no, what you say about Italy is not true because of this and that, and he didn't. He just accused me of making political statements. And this is, again, this shows a lack of political maturity that is not of the country I grew up in, which has had in the past a respectable diplomatic tradition. Concerning what Italy should be doing, respecting international law, stop defending Israel as if it was its officer in charge, cutting trade, cutting economic relations, doing what the dockers and the people striking in Italy are asking, that Italian ports are no longer transit for Israeli goods entering European market through Italy, or for weapons and weapon components transiting from through Italian ports from many European countries toward Israel. And by doing so, Italy is in one go violating its law. It has a law, La Legge 185, which prohibits what Italy is doing, because Italy should at the port should control cargoes toward countries which are outside the European Union, and it doesn't do so. So it violates its own laws. It violates its constitution, which imposes not to engage in wars, and it violates its international commitments, including to prevent genocide. It's not an opinion, let alone what I'm saying with the Commission of Inquiry, the UN Special Committee on Israeli Practices, genocide scholars and genocide organizations, and not about what we say. It's the International Court of Justice. The moment in January 2024, the court recognized a risk of genocide, this triggered the obligation for Italy and all other countries concerned to cut trade, especially armed trades to Israel. And as long as Italy doesn't do that, it violates international law. And because it might find itself complicit in the crimes that Israel is committing. And for that, the Israeli government has been sued by an organization consisting of Italian lawyers who have filed the case at the ICC. So it's very serious.
Last question in the room, then online. Thanks.
Thank you for your press conference. My name is Yu from Kyodo News, Japanese news agency. I have a follow-up question about the sanction to you by United States to make sure the details. So after the sanction, have you ever talked with United States about the sanction? And then one more. So did you get any advice or comment from Secretary General about the sanction? Thank you.
No engagement with the United States, and on the support received so far by the United Nations, I prefer not to comment.
Going online to Ibtasem.
Hi, thank you. My name is Ibtisam Azim, Al Arabi Al Jadid newspaper. Good to see you, and thanks for the briefing. I have two questions. One follows up on your previous answer regarding Italy, or better, or my question is when it comes to the role of third countries. And you talked about it in length and also in your report, but I'm wondering, why do you think third countries ignoring international law, ignoring their own laws, and risking actually being held legally accountable? And the second question is about the media and manufacturing consent. And you touched on the role of the media, but if you could elaborate on that and put it also in a broader context, specifically when it comes how media, Western media, not to say that other media doesn't do also other problematic things, but just in this case, and the way you see powerful media in the West reacting and dealing with this genocide and maybe also other wars like invasion of Iraq, etc. Thank you.
Look, the question on why so many states prefer to violate rather than comply with international law, I think on the one hand, they fear no consequences because international law applies on the assumption of reciprocity. I respect the law knowing that others in good faith will respect it. But of course, the consequences depend, in case of wrongdoings, in case of violations, on the effectiveness of the system to react. And there have been moments in the past, again, speaking from South Africa, clearly many member states have protected apartheid South Africa, but gradually they have been pushed, they have been forced to take measures. They have been forced by the global solidarity, but also by member states within the General Assembly itself. I mean, the key members of the Security Council, United States and United Kingdoms, were key allies, and Israel outside the Security Council were key allies of apartheid South Africa. But what was stark back then was how united the non-alignment movement was, the so-called global South, the global majority. That has changed over time, and Israel has managed to establish its influence in many places in the global majority, in Africa, in Latin America. Then the second element is ideological. And in the global north, in the global minority, there is a significant ideological affinity, at least of those in position of power, with Israel. And in the maybe it's because there is also anti-Muslim feelings. The Palestinians are seen somewhat as less deserving protection than the Israelis. I mean, this is a fact, and it's unspeakable. But we have to face reality. And then the other ideological element, it's something that is not sufficiently discussed in the global arena, but it's how pervasive is the spreading and the influence of Christian Zionism that is turning the so-called global South into a less sensitive to the Palestinian question reality. And this is, I understand, through my exchanges with states and non-state actors, non-governmental organizations, groups of faith in the global South, from Asia, Latin America, and Africa. This is an increasing problem, that it's not allowing people to see where the problem is. It's contributing to manipulate the information regarding Palestine, what happens to the Palestinians. And so ideology is there. Then there is different kinds of ideologies. Then there is profit. Many states are partnering with Israel and testing weapons and surveillance techniques at the expense of the Palestinians. And tragically, many member states, including those who do not have direct ties, diplomatic relations with Israel, one way or another, and indirectly, keep on buying these surveillance techniques, these weapons that are becoming more and more nefarious. Whom are you going to use them against? Drones and the last generation devices that combine unconventional weapons and technology. It's very serious. But last but not least, I also think that there is a fundamental problem of lack of full sovereignty and independence of many countries. We tend to think in terms of state as decision makers, but many states do not have and do not exercise effective decision-making power, because the main power stands and sits with multinationals operating in their countries. So we are still coping with a legacy of settler colonialism, of last century settler colonialism, which has changed shape. There are no states, colonial states with boots on the ground. There are still businesses and others who profiteer from this situation. And Ibtisam, on the media, I don't know, because I don't want to pontificate, I don't want to elaborate further. I've done some investigations that have not culminated in a proper report. But of course, I agree that there has been across mainstream media, although the situation has changed since the starvation and since the end of the breach of the ceasefire in March 2025, things have changed a little bit. But the language used, the lack of context when speaking of Palestine, the no balanced coverage between what happens to the Israelis versus the Palestinians is quite starking. And yeah, so I keep on saying, as soon as I have the time, I would be happy to engage with exploring the role of the media, which deserves scrutiny and investigation. But I also have to keep pace with the Israeli violations of international law, which continue massively despite member states keep on celebrating peace and talking of ceasefire. There is no ceasefire in Gaza. People keep on dying, on being starved and being forcibly displaced, as simple as that.
Final question on the line from Mike Wagenheim. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Albanese, for doing this briefing. Couple questions for you. Number one, you spoke of Christian Zionism a moment ago. There are two Christian groups in America who are suing you for defamation. I wanted to know if you have any comment on that lawsuit and why you're utilizing the South African government to run cover for you and try to duck that lawsuit. The second question, you had an interview in Vanity Fair earlier this year, the one where you admitted you didn't take the bar exam, and you asked the UN in that interview, you said you asked the UN to provide proof that you were not funded by Hamas in travel a couple of years ago, weren't funded by Hamas supporting organizations. The UN hasn't produced that still. Are you willing to produce that? Because I would imagine you would have those records.
Max, I challenge you and anyone, please. I mean, how can the UN prove something that has not happened? This is probably the 10th time that I repeat that. The trip to Australia was funded by the United Nations, and you can claim that the United Nations should not have paid for my trip to Australia or shouldn't pay for my trip to South Africa. And I can tell you, I would love to use the UN funds to go to the occupied Palestinian territory, and unfortunately, Israel doesn't allow me. So I challenge you, you provide evidence that Hamas has paid for me anything, even a meal, and I will stop being a special rapporteur tomorrow.
Why can't you show evidence that
Then let's go to the second question. Yes, I hear there are Christian Zionists who, instead of stopping funding the Israeli crimes and covering for Israeli crimes, are trying to sue me. But I'm covered by privileges and immunities, and I think that this is what the South African government has done. I have no more information. Your government would be happy to answer any questions you have in this respect.
Can I have a follow-up, please?
We've actually got to go to the room now. We've got a couple of questions in the room in South Africa, if you want to go ahead.
Spoke about the difficulties of the international legal system to respond, and we've clearly seen them as well. The limitations of the international legal system to tackle this. Does this report now maybe open up avenues for national courts to be seized in the countries of the third countries? And could you perhaps elaborate on those avenues? Can you hear me?
Well, there is a bit of an echo, but so sorry, repeat just this. National courts.
Maybe I'll do it without. Oh, sorry.
No, you just speak slowly.
Legal system or the willingness of member states to abide by international law. Does your report now maybe provide more incentive or more avenues, legal avenues, for citizens to take up national courts against their own states for failing to meet their responsibilities? And if so, could you perhaps detail what those avenues could look like? Associations could take up, I don't know, the UK or Belgium or whatever, but nationally for failing to meet those legal obligations that they have.
I'll answer this question. So, yes, I've said that in the member states have a series of obligations. Of course, they, as I often say, they have to cut trade, they have to cut the transfer of weapons, but they also have to investigate, prosecute those who might be responsible for crimes or complicity with crimes. This includes, surely, it could include state authorities. It is happening. The member states have cases. Sorry, there are states where there are cases, legal cases initiated against government officials for complicity with Israel's crimes. But member states also have an obligation to regulate and control the businesses registered in their own countries, and very little has been done. Actually, nothing, as far as I know. So in this respect, yes, there are a number of legal cases that have been initiated in a number of states against Airbnb, for example, against Booking.com, against, I know that there is another case against a tourism online platform, I don't know if it's public or not, against oil companies or arms manufacturers. But of course, there is also the very important series of cases that should start at the national level. Domestic court, I hope, because again, I've already mentioned what are the issues with the ICC right now, but there are national courts that are competent surely for their own nationals that have been fighting in the Israeli army. So any national, for example, South Africans or UK citizens or Italian citizens who have been fighting in the Israeli army should be considered suspects and therefore investigated, and if the collected evidence so warrants, prosecuted for alleged crimes they might be involved in. But also there is the case when Israelis who have no nationality connection with a state that can prosecute for international crimes, the mere presence could trigger an investigation. And for this, there is the Indra Job and other lawyers organizations who are trying. Look, it's going to be a long process, but eventually it will succeed. I hope that this is the test. We have not been able to prevent and punish genocide yet. We have not been able to prevent and stop genocide yet. But I do hope that the accountability will start filling the gap.
Hi, Francesca. I'm Marvin Charles from News 24. I just have two questions. Since you've submitted your report, what has changed? And on a personal level, what would your ideal solution be for Gaza?
I don't know what has changed because my report was submitted only a few weeks ago and published only last week. So I wish there was already an effect. What I saw is that there are many member states who are clearly upset, and I'm happy they are upset. I'm not here to make them feel comfortable. Of course, I also see that the attack ad persona, ad hominem continue, and this is disgraceful because, again, I would like to see simply member states engaging with the facts instead of what they think of my persona or the way I execute my mandate. You know, I expect that states engage with the merits of the claims that I make against them. Israel and all states must be serious, must consider seriously the allegations that are made by me, the Commission of Inquiry, and other special rapporteurs, and the crimes that we allege they are implicated in. And this is not just because of what I say in my reports, but this is also for the seriousness of the matter that is being considered today by the International Court of Justice for Genocide and by the ICC. There are cases of war crimes against humanity already that have already translated into arrest warrants. And there are many more cases that, as I was mentioning, are brought before national courts. So this is really a moment of change. It's either justice or its opposite. It's a very, very serious moment. And I'm afraid member states are not grasping with the seriousness of the moment for their own interests. You know, I keep on quoting and referring to this that I share for the benefit of those who follow us online or from New York. But I was really struck by some handwritten lines by Nelson Mandela reflecting on his presidential years and saying women and men have always come and gone through the centuries. Some do not leave a trace, others are remembered for their evils, and others for their attempt to bring justice through their own actions in this life. It's about, also for diplomats and civil servants to decide what kind of role they want to play in this very sad and and tragic page of our history, because we are living on a borrowed future, so they don't seem to realize that.
Okay, we're going to hand it over to New York now, please.
Thank you. Just to say from New York and online, we thank you very much, Ms. Albanese, for your time and for the briefing and for sharing your report with us. And that will close the briefing on our side. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thanks to all the journalists in the room and online. Bye. Till next year.
Thank you.
In New York, inshallah.
Third states.
Sorry, I'm sorry, the audio is very bad. I couldn't understand the last part.
So can I? So there's no live stream. Okay, so can you expand on what essential raw materials?
Yeah, this I understood.
Is exporting to Israel, and then with the naval and land convoys that you recommended that states should facilitate. Okay. Are you in support of foreign military intervention to assist these land and naval convoys?
Is there a third question? That's it. Okay, so let me answer first the question of the raw materials, coal. This is very problematic. I investigated Glencore for South Africa and Drummond for Colombia. And it's so interesting that the two countries, which politically and diplomatically, from a legal point of view, a recourse to an international justice system, are the two are doing the most, leading South Africa, the ICJ case, and the setup of the Hague group together with Colombia, and now I think other 13 states, to take concrete measures against Israel. There are also the states powering, providing the resources, coal, both South Africa and Colombia, that power Israel's killing machine. What does it tell us? Does it expose South Africa hypocrisy? No, I don't think so. Honestly, I do often use the hypocrisy framework for other states, but I don't think that South Africa is the case. There is another aspect that then allows me to connect to the first question that was asked to me. The independence of South Africa from external control. Not even external control, the realization of the self-determination of the South African. That means that the South African people, as a people, determine not only the electoral process, but also the use of the natural resources. This is not complete. And this is why it applies to so many states. Yes, the settler colonial regime has started to be dismantled, but the dismantlement is not complete because, and this is what I exposed in my July report, private entities, businesses, arms manufacturers first and foremost, but also raw materials producers still control a lot of the economy up to the point that it can strain and squeeze and challenge and change decision or alter the decision-making power of a state. States are not free from the profit world influence. So moving to the, and this is work in progress. Moving to South Africa, again, has been such a beautiful, beautiful experience. I mean, it was very easy to feel at home here. And when you feel at home, you also feel on your skin the good and the bad. I mean, I've not been able to travel much, but the little I've been able to go outside of Johannesburg towards Soweto, or simply from the airport here, the fact that the apartheid has not been fully dismantled is clear. There is still physical segregation, and physical segregation also is accompanied by ginormous inequality that is not being resolved. Education and violence and access to opportunities are not equal in this country. Is it because, of course, there are many components. Surely there are matters that can be attributed to governments, but I also think that it really takes time to uproot the legacy of 300 years of brutal colonialism preceded by slavery. There are also the wounds of part of the populations who are here as children, I mean, as heirs of people who were uprooted somewhere else and be brought as slaves. It's brutal. How do you heal all these? It takes time, and so it doesn't, I mean, the reconciliation, it's something that you cultivate every day. But first and foremost, I think looking at other experiences, and all reconciliation experiences speak loud more for their failure than their successes, but because it takes generations to heal. Surely you need robust policies and courageous leaders, but also very committed individuals, very committed societies that are able to put the common good ahead of their private interests. So it's an interplay of individuals and collective, I think. But I trust this country. There are far too many beautiful people for it not to succeed. The question is, will you keep on trusting each other? Will you keep on loving each other as despite the difference and then despite the differences, the contradictions, and the pain that is still to be, and the wounds that are still to heal?
Ms. Albanese, sorry, I'm so sorry. She has to do.
I really have to go. I'm sorry.
TV interview that was scheduled before today. So we're going to have to close it.
Do I need to leave a mic?
Thank you. Sorry.
No, I was removing a microphone.
So thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it. Ms. Albanese.
Never finish the press conference with an